Hello, everybody, and welcome to Everyday Bitcoin, a new Bitcoin podcast focusing on Bitcoin's adoption and its use as everyday money as a medium of exchange. Today, coming to you on October 27th, 2025, or block height 921,032 at a current Bitcoin price of 115,166 US dollars. Just as a timekeeping piece, the price doesn't actually matter. Who knows if it could go up or down? No one knows, and we're not here to talk about that. But what we are here to talk about today is Fountain. I'm here with Nick Malster, the co-founder of Fountain, which is a podcasting 2.0. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Hey, Keith. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Cool. Very happy to have you here. This is episode number 2, and this podcast is hosted via Fountain. So it's cool to have you here. And yeah, could you go into, I guess, a little bit about your Bitcoin story? Like, how did you end up here, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I started out in Bitcoin, it must have been 2021, I think, around the same time as we founded Fountain. And my old friend from school, Oscar, we'd always been talking about having a business together. And during COVID, we had some time to play around with some ideas. And we decided to build a podcast app. And it was maybe a couple of months after that we started messing around with Lightning, and realized that it would be such an amazing solution for the listeners to be able to pay the podcasters directly through the app, directly from the player. So yeah, I went from having kind of zero knowledge about Bitcoin to having a Bitcoin startup very quickly. And I kind of regretted all those years when Oscar had kind of tried to tip me towards Bitcoin and asked me to look into it or buy some. And I just wasn't interested, So it only really came down to being in a position of responsibility where I had some pressure on me to really learn it deeply, to find out what it was all about. And I think to begin with, like many podcasters, also many Bitcoiners, I started out reading the Bitcoin Standard as sort of my base foundation, and then spent a lot of time listening to Bitcoin podcasts. And that was kind of how I picked up my knowledge around Bitcoin.
Oh, okay. Nice. Very cool. So from the beginning, it was always, at least with Fountain, it was always via Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, it always has been and always will be, just payments in Bitcoin. So yeah, I think that's the way we want to go. We always have people reaching out to us about like other coins and stuff, and we just don't really pay any interest to that. Like
Nice.
we're going to be Bitcoin only forever.
Awesome. Love to hear that. And then I guess in the same vein, could you go, I guess, just to explain to the people who don't understand, but who don't know about what Fountain is, what podcasting 2.0 is, and why it's different than like Spotify or Apple or whatever?
Yeah, I guess just to give some backstory, if you think about podcast apps, they haven't really changed very much in the sort of 20 years that they've been around. It's still the same set of features. It's a very utilitarian experience. I put on a podcast, I listen to it, and that's about it. And I think there's just a massive need for podcasting to evolve as a medium to incorporate new features and deliver new experiences for listeners, because it has some catching up to do. If you compare it to YouTube or other kind of like video streaming platforms, podcasting is way behind. Yet if you look at representation of podcast listeners globally, it's a massive, massive thing. So I think this was 2021 when Adam Curry, who is one of the original kind of co-inventors of podcasting, he and Dave Jones set out to create a new podcast namespace. So a new series of tags and features that were incorporated into the RSS feed that would work across every hosting platform, every podcast listening app. So these are things like chapters, transcripts, also video, and of course, like the Lightning payments as well. And so Podcast Index is an open community. Anyone can contribute to it. Anyone can, submit requests or proposals. And app developers or hosting providers can sort of pick and choose which features they want to roll out. So yeah, back in 2021, we learned about podcasting 2.0. We decided we wanted to be involved right from the offset. Oscar and I are massive podcast fans, and we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to support this new movement. So we got to building sort of the V1, and yeah, we had very basic things. Like we had a clipping feature, we had like the boost and the streaming payments, that was about it. UX was pretty terrible, but it was it was great. We like immediately saw like the power of podcasting to to deliver new types of experiences. And I think the other thing as well is that podcasting 2.0 also incorporates the podcast index, which is an independent and open index of podcasts, which is
Okay.
it's interesting because if you think about where podcasting began like 20 years ago, it was Apple who put podcasts in the iPod. That's what kind of kicked it all off. And over the years, like many other app developers, like Overcast or Pocket Casts, even Spotify now decided to build podcast players. And their first point of call was to use Apple's podcast index to ingest all the podcasts for the RSS feeds. And what they noticed was that after some time, Apple started censoring podcasts. So if they didn't comply with
really?
their, content guidelines, they would just simply take them down. Yeah. Which is, I think, completely against the open nature of podcasting. Like it's
Of
kind of
course.
like the one thing that podcasting has that people can't take away is that it stands for free speech. And seeing as you own your RSS feed, you own the content and any app can choose to accept it or not. But because all these apps are using Apple's index, they were also disappearing on Pocket Casts and other places as well. So Adam Curry said, fuck that. I want to build my own podcast index that people can't mess with. So the podcast index was born. And so on podcast index, you'll find I think 4 million different shows. Like pretty much every feed that's out there on other apps will also be in podcast index. So that's, I guess, like another tenet of what we do is that, you have some degree of, censorship resistance by putting your podcast on podcast index.
Yeah, which is great. And it doesn't surprise me that Apple would be one to censor, since apparently they're terrible. I'm sure you would know with, I guess, with the app itself, but I know they're terrible for like app developers and whatnot. So it doesn't surprise me that that extends to, well, podcasts, to everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one thing that's quite interesting as well is that we've seen Apple like fairly recently start to embrace podcasting 2.0 as well. So I think this was last year they added support for the transcript tag. So they now, like, if the podcaster includes a transcript in their RSS feed, that transcript becomes available in Apple Podcasts, which is really cool because I think for us in the community, it was a real like vote of confidence that the big players are watching what we're doing and they see the potential in it. So we
Yeah.
can only hope that they and others hope to roll out more features.
Yeah, and I mean, I clearly think obviously 2.0, like the value for value is the right way to go. And in my point of view, there should be nothing that stops big tech from wanting to, I guess, throttle that, because obviously they're just distributing. They're not the advertising platforms that are going to suffer from just being able to pay your podcasters and whoever you listen to directly. Yes. Have you had any problems with Apple and with Lightning payments and anything? Because I know sometimes, like I think with Primal maybe, and maybe now with Damus, they give them a lot of issues having, Lightning built in and like, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've managed to fly pretty under the radar so far. I remember that Will from Damus had a lot of issues in the early days with the Zap button and Apple like rejecting like the new app updates and requesting that they remove that, and they had to put it on the profile for a bit. And yeah, there doesn't really seem to be any logic to how Apple test new apps when you submit to the app stores. Sometimes they pick up on stuff, sometimes they don't. But we've managed to be okay so far. I think, yeah, it seems to be okay, but it feels risky, that at any minute they could just change their policies and they could tear us down. So we're living on the edge, but we've been on this edge for 3 or 4 years, so we're pretty comfortable now.
Well, hopefully things keep going as they are, and Apple leaves you alone. But I guess just to touch upon something I mentioned for anyone listening that is not familiar with Fountain or podcasting 2.0, essentially it all works on value for value, which is a big ethos of the Bitcoin community. Essentially, if you get value from something, whether it be a podcast or like reading an article, the logical, I guess, action would be to give value back. And you can do that via Bitcoin with micropayments, because since Bitcoin's so divisible, you can literally send fractions of a US cent. So you can tip, like if you like right now listening to this podcast, if you found value in it, you can choose to tip me in even literally fractions of a US cent, anyway, up to, you know, a whole Bitcoin if you really want to, which would, but and all support is greatly appreciated as independent podcasts. But essentially, yeah, so that's what we're here to primarily promote and talk about, is the whole value for value incorporating Bitcoin. But that one also does support, I guess, fiat payments, correct, for tipping through Stripe?
Yeah, so we just to give some context, like we originally started out just as a podcast player, and over the summer we launched a podcast hosting platform, which obviously Keith, you are now using to host your podcast. And so, yeah, as a podcaster, you can, it's very easy just to start a podcast on Fountain or move from an existing hosting provider. We host your podcast, distribute it to all the different apps, and then you have. And I think where this came from was we, like I said, wanted to always be like 100% Bitcoin. But there's also this like tension whereby even certain Bitcoiners, when you're presented with an option of like either paying with Lightning or paying with a bank card or Apple Pay, like still a lot of people will choose Apple Pay, just because we're not at the point yet where we have, you know, hyper Bitcoinization where spending Bitcoin is just part of daily life. And so we wanted to give that option for listeners to also pay with their bank card as well. So yeah, you can Stripe as a podcaster, and you can offer either payment methods. And yeah, I guess the benefit of getting paid with Lightning is you get paid instantly, right? It doesn't go through Stripe system, and you also pay lower fees as well. So it's 2% fee versus 5% plus Stripe's fees.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Bitcoin is just the superior money, so I'd much rather have sats than dollars or whatever it be. Do you have stats on like how, like, division between like boosts that people send via Bitcoin and via fiat?
We don't actually, but I can say like anecdotally that the volume of Lightning payments is much, much higher than card payments. So cool. For subscriptions, for sure, it's probably, you know, maybe slightly more on card payments for subscriptions, just because it's, you know, it's kind of easier. Like subscriptions with Lightning is still complex. Like most people don't hold a lot of sats in a Lightning wallet. And if that wallet gets emptied, like what happens to the recurring invoice that gets generated? So yeah, but it is mostly Lightning across the board.
Yeah, and obviously with Lightning, you would have to also sign it. But I think it's, at least in my opinion, a good idea, or well, probably would just be to obviously send an email reminder with a QR code that like a week ahead of time you could just scan and keep the membership going. I would like to see people start doing that, which would be cool. But and do you have any stats on like just in general boosts and supports per month for like how, like, not in terms of volume, like how many sats are flowing per month to like creators and stuff?
We do have some stats from last year that I can share with you. Yeah. So in 2024, listeners sent 2 Bitcoin in total, which at the current price back then was around $130,000, obviously a little bit more now. And yeah, like we see that the average boost value last year was around like 3,500 sats. Oh, wow. So I guess like, you know, yeah, $4.50 in today's terms, which is fairly high, you know. There are a lot of listeners out there that just hit that boost button hard and they'll send, I think the max transaction value you can send on Fountain is like 500,000 sats. And so yeah, shows like Linux Unplugged often get like a lot of big boosts, and also some of the Bitcoin shows as well, like the Google Weekly, they often get some big boosts as well. But yeah, it's cool to see that it's not just Bitcoin shows doing well. I think Linux Unplugged is a really good example. So Chris, who runs Jupiter Broadcasting, he has a network of different shows, and Linux Unplugged is one of them. And so his audience is quite technical, but they're not native Bitcoiners. He's had to introduce them to Bitcoin and also now introduce them to Nostr, and they've grasped it pretty quickly. And so it's working well.
Nice. And then what's like the divide, I guess, if you know, between Bitcoin podcasts and non-Bitcoin podcasts that are currently hosted on Fountain? Do you know off the top of your head?
Of the ones hosted on Fountain, it's still predominantly Bitcoin podcasts. So I'd say about 90%. Okay. But if you look at the number of shows that have been claimed on Fountain, and just to explain this to your listeners, before we had hosting, we had a simple service whereby you could just claim ownership of your podcast feed on Fountain, and we would then connect your Fountain Lightning address to your podcast feed. So you could receive payments on Fountain and other apps without actually hosting on Fountain. So there's, I think, probably about 2,500 shows that have done that. And I would say that, yeah, there's a much greater diversity for those podcasts than the ones we host. I couldn't give you an exact number on what the split is, though.
Okay. I'd be curious to see the stats for 2025 and how much it's grown from 2 Bitcoin. I, at least personally, I mean, I started using Fountain this year. So, and from my biased point of view, it seemed that Fountain's grown a lot this year. At least just what I see on Nostr. But once again, we are in a Bitcoin bubble on Nostr. So
we are. I think like our goal this year for trying to grow the amount of listener support was to diversify the ways that listeners can support the podcast. Obviously, adding card payments is one of those as a payment method. But going back to what you were saying about value for value, like we're true believers in this. There's actually a great article by Gigi, which is a few years old now, called "The Freedom of Value," and it just explains in very simple terms like what value for value is and like how to kind of comprehend it, and some real world examples of like how it's been around for many years. Like if you think about like street buskers, for example, like musicians who play like in the London Underground, for example, you know, the audience kind of intuitively knows that like if they want the music to continue, they have to send some money back, and that's what keeps them afloat, and that works. But we also recognize that like it's, for some people, it's just not a very natural thing, you know, like people are just used to getting podcasts for free. It kind of goes back to like the very beginning of podcasting as being like a free and open medium for free speech. So that's why we added subscriptions as well, which is a much more common way to think about, you know, giving value back to a podcaster. You're essentially buying a product, and that product usually consists of, you know, maybe early access to new episodes, ad-free versions, maybe bonus episodes as well. And that's just become like very familiar as a call to action that you hear in any podcast, like particularly some of the bigger ones on networks, which is like, hey, if you want to subscribe, like go here, get this. And it feels like a deal. So yeah, we added subscriptions to like part of the monetization tools when we launched Fountain Hosting, and that's been really, really successful so far. You know, if you look at like companies like Patreon, you know, they're doing billions of dollars. I say billions, I don't know the exact number, but it's a large amount. And we want to try and get Fountain to the place. We want to do that same amount of transaction volume in Bitcoin. I think like that's a great motivation for us, is like we can help grow Bitcoin by growing Fountain, because a lot of listeners come to Fountain not for Bitcoin. They've come because their friends told them or a podcaster has told them, and you know, they might be completely new to Bitcoin. We want it to be really easy for them to get started and to stick around and share that with other people as well.
Mm-hmm. And in that vein, do you have like any I guess, I don't know, advice for people that are non-Bitcoiners that are listening, and how they can get more involved, or how they could, I guess, wrap their head around how it all works and everything?
Yeah, well, I guess the thing that I always recommend to people is to download Strike, because it's a very simple Lightning wallet that also supports the sort of like on-ramp to Bitcoin from your bank account, from USD, you know, from any currency in the world pretty much. And from it, that makes it really, really easy for you just to top up your Fountain wallet and start supporting podcasters on Fountain. So that would be like my number one thing. I also always recommend people to download Primal, which has its own inbuilt Lightning wallet as well.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's Primal for me is probably the best Nostr client out there at delivering that sort of Twitter style experience. And yeah, if you come to Fountain, one of the first things you'll see is like all these comments and stuff, and zaps and likes and replies, and all of that is powered by Nostr. But yeah, having Primal like is a really good way just to kind of familiarize yourself with the Nostr community and see beyond just Fountain, because you know, Fountain isn't just a self-contained social community; it's part of a bigger ecosystem on the Nostr network.
Mm-hmm. Which yeah, I think that's totally how I discovered Fountain, was via Nostr and maybe the Bitcoin podcast or Walker discussing Fountain. And for those listening that aren't aware, Nostr is a like an open, permissionless protocol similar to Bitcoin, but for notes and other stuff, which is the protocol stands for, but it's a way to just verify with a public-private key pair, essentially just information online. And right now, one of the big use cases is like a Twitter alternative, but it's all, open source, decentralized, censorship resistant, and you have ownership over your content, which is very different than pretty much everything else like Twitter, Instagram, etc., where you don't own anything that you upload to them. Literally, the big tech owns your stuff. But Nostr is different, and like Nick is saying, Fatwin incorporates Nostr, so you can actually log in with your Nostr key to Fatwin and be able to interact directly with your podcasters, comment, boost, and etc. And it's all tied to your Nostr key, which is really exciting. And then I guess was Nostr incorporate? Well, I mean, Nostr, when was it? 2022 was Nostr. So if you said 2021, you kind of started. When did you incorporate Nostr? I guess is the question into Fatwin.
Good question. I would say I think it was last year. It was definitely last year. Yeah, that was a big change for us because we always had like a social aspect to Fountain in that, if you sent a boost to a podcast, other people who followed you would see that boost in their feed. They could click through to the episode, they could listen to it. And yeah, when Nostr came along, it just made a lot of sense for us because it meant that it wasn't just this kind of internal bubble of social activity. It was extending beyond that as well. So just to give you an example, like if I sent a boost to this podcast, everyone who follows me on Nostr is going to see that boost, not just everyone who's on Fountain. So if I was to see that boost in Primal, for example, I would see my profile name, I'd see the message, I'd see the Fountain link, and I'd also see a receipt for the payment I've sent. And so, yeah, the cool thing too is that like anyone who sees that on Primal is able to interact with that post. They're able to like it. They're able to zap it. And then listeners on Fountain will see those reactions and be able to respond as well. So the engagement really travels across the borders that have been traditionally kind of set by these apps or platforms, and it's all interoperable.
Yeah, which I think is really powerful and also just beautiful that you can literally discover podcasts not like literally on Nostr and all of its various different apps because it's all a giant, massive ecosystem. You don't have to actually be using Fatwin in order to discover a podcast or to interact with your podcast. And it's really cool live streams, which is something that I want to incorporate into this podcast eventually, live streaming on Nostr, the podcast, and then obviously hosting it on Fatwin. But it's just really amazing how it all works together, and with the Bitcoin incorporation, obviously, and the ability to just send value for value. And then I guess in the vein of in Fatwin, are you able to share any, I guess, roadmap for what people can expect going forward? Are you able to publicly talk about anything?
Well, you'll see in a couple of weeks' time. It might even be live by the time this episode is out. We're launching a brand new wallet inside Fountain, which will support Nostr Wallet Connect as well. So you can bring an external wallet and connect that to Fountain. But it's just generally a much improved UX and UI across the board when it comes to all sorts of payments. We will also have a better on-ramp for US listeners to begin with as well. And by on-ramp, I'm talking about like that conversion from USD into Bitcoin. So you'll be able to connect a bank account and essentially top up your Fountain wallet in like one tap. So convert the USD in your bank account straight into sats in your Fountain wallet. So that's one thing. And yeah, I think aside from that, we're just going to really continue to focus on the hosting features because, yeah, what we launched this summer was still like an MVP. There's some way to go to really get that to where we want it to be, particularly when it comes to the social and community side of things. So looking at new ways to bring listeners of podcasts together into like a shared space. We're also very interested in live streaming as well. You can't actually host and produce your live stream in Fountain yet. You can go live on Nostr through zap.stream and that'll appear in Fountain. But we're interested to explore what that could look like in Fountain as well, because that's an incredibly popular thing for podcasters to do, is to go live. You know, like many podcasters already go live on X, on YouTube, etc. And to be able to add, you know, Fountain and the modern podcast apps and the Nostr ecosystem to that distribution would be amazing. Because yeah, that I don't know if you mentioned like listening to live stream podcasts on Nostr. It is an amazing experience. Like it's so great when you have the live
Yeah,
chat and you have the live payments, and like the podcasters that do it, you know, they're probably not pulling in like huge audiences. Like we're talking maybe like a couple of hundred people max, but they're earning like a couple of 100,000 sats just from going live for an hour. And the end of
yeah.
the recording, they just like publish that on their RSS feed. And yeah, so it's really cool. We're really interested in developing that further.
Yeah, I think that'd be super, well, yeah, valuable for the podcaster and also for the listener, just to be able to tune into the live stream just in the same app. And obviously, you could still view it anywhere on Nostr because of the way the protocol works. But as the creator itself, as a new creator of podcast, that would be a streamlined and easy way just to go live via Fountain and then have it all be right there.
One thing I
Yeah.
really like about YouTube actually is that if you're live on YouTube, if you watch the live stream back after the live stream has ended, you can like replay the live chat in the sort of
Yes.
sidebar, which is really cool. Because at the moment, obviously, you go live, but your live chat is kind of ephemeral. It disappears afterwards. Like it doesn't carry over to the published episode you put out afterwards. So if we can solve a way to, you know, have the live chat from the live stream like still be there when you're listening after the fact, that'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it all works, but I would think that it wouldn't be that difficult to do. What do I know? I'm not a developer. But I would agree it would be cool. And yeah, the live streaming, like, I mean, I'm really bad at tuning in live to a lot of the shows, but when I can, I do, and it's always a good time. And being able to interact just with the people, ask questions, comment, and the ability to send value, just a good time overall. Good vibes all around. It's kind of, I don't know if it sounds crazy to like say it's a good time to spend money, but but like in the value for value, in the mindset of it all, it feels good. Like if you're literally being entertained and learning, getting value, you should give. Like right now, my boosts are like 1,000 sats. Also because haven't worked in 10 months. But I'm excited that once I'm back to work in a month or two, I'm going to be sending some pretty fat boosts. Be flooding a lot of zaps, a lot of big fat zaps coming to everyone's ways. I'm excited for that. And yeah, do you have not to bounce around, but do you geographically, what's the biggest market for Fountain? Do you know?
It's definitely mostly North America, and always has been the biggest market for us. I guess just because in the US, you know, it's much more Bitcoin friendly as a culture, you know. And I think also some of the bigger podcasts that we brought on from the beginning had most of their audiences in the US as well. But you know, it grows around the world. Like we still have a pretty decent size user base in Europe.
Nice. And do you by chance have stats on like per country or yeah, geographically, like the boost distribution, like in terms of sizes of boost? You said the median was like 3,500 sats. Do you have that per country basis, or is that too in depth?
I don't have that for country, but I'd be interested to find that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say that yeah, still the majority of the boost value or volume comes from the US.
Okay. Yeah, I would be really curious to see if there's any. I would assume the same thing, that the US would be the biggest and also maybe the largest average boost, but who knows? Maybe there'd be a surprise somewhere in there of a country that, I don't know, is more likely to give value back. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to give you perspective, in the UK, I mean, we don't have Cash App in the UK.
Oh,
We only got Strike in the UK. I think it was last year. And the government regulations on crypto are much tighter over here, and again similar for a lot of the other European countries as well, which has definitely held back adoption. You know, if you're in the US 2 years ago, it's very easy if you have Cash App just to get started on Fountain, but we haven't had that over here. So hopefully that changes. I mean, with our current government, I can't see that changing anytime soon because they've got bigger issues to solve.
Yeah.
But at least we have Strike now in the UK. Like the on ramp is pretty smooth. Once you've done it once, you can do it again, no problem.
Mhm. Yeah, thankfully, I know Jack Mallers is always very public about obviously, for those that don't know, I know you know, but for those that don't know, Jack Mallers is the CEO of Strike and founder. And he's very public about, I guess, the happenings in the Strike space. And it seems that this year is making a lot of strides in Europe in general. So hopefully, I love Strike, use it all the time, and use it today. I bought a Start 9 today, a one server paid via Strike, so that's cool. Nonetheless, I forget where I was going with this thought, but it's important that Strike will be coming to Europe and that more people will have access to really easy ways to onboard it to Bitcoin. And then obviously Strike's incorporation with Fountain's always good, seamless way to get to top up your wallet and then be able to boost your people. Can you boost like from Strike directly? Like how does or no?
You can't boost from Strike, no. Yeah, so the apps you can boost from, like Fountain is just one of many. There are others too. So you've got like Castomatic, you've got Caster, Podcast Guru, Podverse, lots of like modern podcast apps that are all using the podcasting 2.0 specification. And yeah, we hope to see more too.
Mm-hmm. But can you? I guess maybe my question was worded incorrectly. Can you do boost and then have it open up like the invoice open up in Strike, or does it always pulls from the Strike from the Fountain wallet?
Yeah, it always pays from your Fountain wallet.
Okay.
When we add Nostr Wallet Connect, you'll be able to pay from external wallet, but Strike doesn't support that.
Okay. Cool. At least yes. Okay. Cool. And then I guess we'll come to a close. I always like to ask, and by always I mean I've done it once before and I'm gonna do it again. A non-Bitcoin question for you. And we'll continue to do this going forward. But if it's cool with you, I'll ask you a non-Bitcoin question. Okay. What makes you lose track of time? That's not Bitcoin or Fountain or work related.
Yeah, good question. I would say having kids.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that certainly like weekends. So I've got a son who's 2 years old, and yeah, the weekends just like completely fly by now. I think it's just like before you have kids, like the weekends are yours and yours only. You can kind of do whatever you want, and once you have a child, your weekends aren't about you anymore. And that it's also a great thing as well, because like you kind of put yourself to one side. You stop being so kind of I guess like kind of self-centered in the way you spend your time, which is a really nice thing. But yeah, this weekend just passed, just like flew by, and I was like, what did I even do? Like, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. And for the listeners, is there anywhere you want to send people or anything that the non-Fountain listeners should know about? Well, anywhere you want to send people or give them last information?
Yeah, go check out Fountain. You can get Fountain on the App Store and Google Play Store. Sign up with your email. We give you a Lightning wallet. Like I said before, download Strike if you don't have it already, and you can top up your Fountain wallet pretty quickly. And yeah, you can also create a Nostr profile in Fountain as well. So all of your interactions will be broadcast on the Nostr network. Yeah, check out our website and check out the feed, check out the charts. You'll find like lots of amazing shows there that you can support, and let us know what you think. And if you have a podcast yourself, yeah, go to fountain.fm/podcasters. You can find out all about our hosting product, and I'd love to get you onboarded.
Yes, I agree. Everyone, if you're not listening already on Fountain, go check out Fountain. It's really cool, and it's a way to, like we've been talking about, provide value. And it's also, Nick touched upon it briefly in the beginning, but you can like very easily clip out parts of podcasts, of episodes, and share them very quickly and easily with people, which I think, at least as far as I know, like Spotify doesn't have that, I don't think. It's something that I was surprised to see and never thought of, but it's like kind of like how you can very easily share a clip on YouTube, like part of a video. Same thing with the podcast and Fountain. So yeah, check out Fountain, fountain.fm. all your favorite podcasts, or sorry, your favorite app store. It'll be there. And yeah, you can support this show if you desire, and other cool shows, and also start your own show, because why not? The world needs more podcasts. Great. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for coming on board, and thanks for everybody for listening. And yeah, I guess we'll see you next time. Bye.